Hey, Bigpod, I have a problem.
Really, what?
These little plastic miniatures that you see here behind me,
Yeah,
these are for a game called Warhammer. And
of course.
this small amount of miniatures already cost me like $100 fucking.
Oh god.
I bought another box of them, and then another box, and then another box, and then another box. Yeah. Because that's what you do with
So,
Warhammer. You just keep buying product, and then you just I
so you bought what is essentially year's supply, a many years supply of our cloud servers
uh
just for that.
just to play with plastic toys that I have to still assemble and paint.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a problem.
Cue the music.
Hey guys, it's your host Josh
Hello.
here. I am. This is the show called No Tucks Allowed, where we talk lots about technology, and we're two Linux users, but we don't talk about penguins. Instead, we're talking about robots, some kind of rock, and cloud.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of AI too, because after all, it's a tech podcast, and it's so all over the newsfeed these days. That's really hard to try not to talk about it sometimes. Sorry. But to help me in figuring this stuff out, even though he tends to contribute nothing as to like actual discussion topics or like topics of what we talk about, but he does help talk about the topics at least. I have brought with me Bigpod.
Hello.
Just to let you know, Bigpod. I was logging into my Mastodon, and this was like 3 or 4 days ago, and I saw this interesting post from Graphene OS talking about like how much money it would cost for them to make their own phone. And like, okay,
A lot, I bet.
it turns out that it is a lot. They don't really give like numbers, but we've seen a lot of these phone startups talk about like these numbers, and it's not cheap. So, if you're not aware, Graphene OS is an Android ROM, or basically like an alternative Android-based operating system for your phone. And fairly famously in like the ROM space, they only really focus and support Google's Pixel device line. So I went up this conversation thread, just like, where did this start? And it turns out that apparently the Android Open Source Project, or AOSP, which locked out like the Git branch, so they're only releasing things in like tarballs.
Yeah,
Well,
basically in large batches.
Yeah, well, what they did was that they removed low-level firmware integrations and kernel patches that included driver support for Pixel devices from AOSP.
Oh.
Yeah. So they went on this fairly long-winded post. I have it linked in the show notes that you can read. And I also have the Cyber Insider article that gives like a fairly good explainer of what it is. But Bigpod, I know that you're a big fan of using an Android phone, specifically like the Samsung variety. But if for some reason you were ever to get off of Samsung, you wanted to try like a more open source phone approach, you'd probably wind up using either Graphene OS or EOS, because I don't think Lineage is really updated anymore. So my question is, if you were a user of custom ROMs on your phone, how concerned are you at this point?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I have no frame of reference because I only ever once installed a custom ROM onto a phone, and even then I didn't see the point of it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's mostly like use case or like personal preferences. Like back back when I was using basically glorified DSL internet, I was sitting here trying to find ways so that like even though like I had a constant internet connection, I was very limited in like actual bandwidth.
Yeah.
So I was looking for like all the ways that like I could control my network traffic and be able to limit it. Well, it turns out that sometimes Android, even though it doesn't look like it's doing anything, is just passively using like 10 megabits of like data for some reason.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's broadcasting like telemetry data up through the cloud. It didn't look like it was a syncing solution at the time. This was years ago that I found this, but and just that passive use from Android had a noticeable impact on like my internet traffic because I didn't have a whole lot of bandwidth to actually be pulling down bandwidth traffic from, and
Interesting.
so this was when I first stepped into like installing custom ROMs because I didn't want so I'm not a big fan of like all the extra things that's in Android these days. Like my Samsung phone, I don't use all the Samsung stuff like at all. So I don't see why. I would much prefer a way to be able to remove that software. Of course, Samsung phones are so locked down that it's basically not worth trying to put a ROM on them. So that was my mistake. But I do see some value in like projects like Graphene as well because it's basically Android but built out of the box to be more secure as well. So they're doing stuff with like better application sandboxing and so on with how they operate. So this is. So there is some value in Graphene OS, mostly from like a security model standpoint. It is obviously not, and of course because of the security focus, there is going to impact the usability of the device too. Because first of all, it's a custom ROM, which means that you had to root your phone. So those apps like your banking apps might not work on Graphene OS.
Yeah.
Because the fact is the phone is rooted, and some just have a check for that. So. There are some usability issues with making use of Graphene OS, but at the same time, you can also work around them too. Or you could just not use your bank's phone application, and just use like the mobile website that your bank also provides, because most of them, at least in my use case, still have that. And plus, honestly, the app is garbage, so the website's also going to be garbage too. So it's garbage no matter how you look at it.
Well. For me, I have to say that my bank actually does a very good job of having a good app.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't use a big national bank brand, so of course it's going to be terrible. But anyways, they started talking about this here, and their biggest blocker is that while they managed to get it working, they managed to get an Android 16 release. So they do have it working. They had to basically rewrite like the USB-C port control features, and they basically had to rewrite like half the code of the driver itself. And then they're talking about some other things that Graphene OS disabled, and then they start talking about like. So then we considered paying a ODM or a device manufacturer to make a Snapdragon-based device for them. And it turns out that they can technically do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They can actually pay the money to do it as well. but it comes down to the question of, at that point, then do people buy the phone? Because when you're dropping lots of money on a product,
Yeah.
hopefully the product sells. And a lot of the times when you're selling like a phone like this, like the only one that actually sold to any extent was the OnePlus phones.
Yeah.
I don't think of any other brand that started off with from a ROM fork that got anywhere.
Well, what needs to happen is you need to get into the phone seller market and get on contracts.
That is true. Like that is like the easiest way possible. Because even if you're just
there is no way it will happen otherwise. Because remember or think about how much sales fell down for Sony since they don't sell through mobile plan providers anymore.
Right? Like
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen any Sony phones for like a couple years at this point.
Yeah,
Like, I used to see like they weren't like the most commonly seen phone in like the wild, but you know I still saw them every now and then.
yeah, but at the time, there was a lot more competition also.
That is true. That is true. We are seeing like these phone manufacturers even in the Android space. They're the field is narrowing. Like
Yeah.
what happened to HTC? HTC, like they had some pretty compelling phones every now and then. Like
I haven't heard of them for a while now.
I know, right? Like they were the last phone manufacturer that was still making dual front facing speakers.
Yeah.
Like that was the last phone that actually sounded half decent on the speaker. I'm serious.
Well,
like,
I had a Sony with dual front facing speakers.
Yeah, I mean,
I think I can still find it if I really
you
wanted
probably
to.
could. I don't have that HTC phone anymore because you know it was using that aluminum body, and you know I dropped it and immediately shattered the screen. But you know if you know that phone was plastic instead of metal, I'd probably still have it.
Well, I would need to open one of my drawers and pull out that Sony.
Yeah.
The Z5 Compact.
Yeah, you know, I have been eyeballing Sony phones. I really have been because you know I've still gotta like make a switch off my phone at some point because you know I'm reaching that end of support life cycle on my phone right now. It's like the longest I've actually had a phone because you know I just wanted to write it up because you know I didn't have any reason to upgrade. Well, this year I have a reason to upgrade. I have until December.
Well, I probably won't be upgrading even if my phone gets to end of life sooner, because it's still like new,
right?
Like
that's the thing that makes me sad. Like I find a lot of value in the software patches, but then again, that's because you know, technically, I'm a fairly known person in like my local area.
Yeah.
I still have access to lots of very critical things with companies that actually have lots of money and financial capital in some areas. So I think that I should probably stay on like these supported devices on because you know that just makes sense in my head brain. So I'm just looking at like either of these Sony phones, which I still need to figure out like the support cycle because I don't know if I want to buy a phone that's only gonna get like 2 years worth of updates and stuff. I'm not gonna go for that route, but you know the 5+ years, yeah.
Well, you could also just install custom ROM on your Samsung.
I could because you know Samsung is actually one of the better manufacturers about that.
But then again, you are in America, in North America, so you may have a North American model, which is basically trash tier compared to the European model, since bootloader can have problems being unlocked because it's made for North America instead of Europe.
Yeah,
and so on.
That's not necessarily like Sony's fault there. That's a lot of carrier restrictions.
Yeah, like Here, basically, all I have to do is press a button and I have unlocked bootloader.
Yeah. It used to be that easy here. I wish it was. In fact, I still think that's kind of like that on Pixels. Like I it's still a little bit more complicated than what it used to be with like the old Nexus phones. Because I remember back in the days of using the Google Nexus 5, it was just a simple ADB command. I think it was like ADB bootloader unlock, and then it was done.
Here, all I have to do is go into developer settings in my phone, in my Samsung, and press the unlock bootloader button.
You're making me jealous. Maybe I should buy a European phone and try to use it in the United States. Some of them do work.
I know that's a Samsung specific thing.
Yeah.
That they have a unlock bootloader button.
All right, so moving on, Bigpod. I heard that people were having issues with the internet on Friday.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either because, well, for one thing, I wasn't using Google stuff at all, nor apparently anything that was making use of Google.
I was either asleep or in a forest while this was happening.
Yeah. Well, anyways, this was mostly so. What happened? First of all, is Google was deploying new software updates to the Google Cloud infrastructure. This thing called service control, and to add a new feature for like quota policy checks, right?
Yeah.
The code change and binary release went through the region rollout by region by region rollout path, so it hits some areas before the others. And
yeah, of course.
The code, and according to their incident report that we have linked in the show notes, Google said that this update had some changes that had a safety precaution built into it that came with a red button feature to turn off policy serving path. But it did not have appropriate error handling, nor was it feature flag protected.
Oh.
Without appropriate error handling, it was causing a null pointer crash.
Oh, so no reference exception, I guess.
They don't go into that much detail, but I would assume that's probably what it is. But anyways,
the null exceptions.
Yeah.
However it's called in the language they're using.
I would assume it's either Go or C because that's generally what they use. But anyways, it took down basically everything in the Google Cloud. Yeah. Most notably from like us consumers, it took down Gmail and Google Drive and Google Docs.
Yeah.
So, it didn't seem to affect YouTube, so YouTube was still up, but it did affect like the Google Media CDN, which I know YouTube sometimes uses, but not a whole lot. And Google Search was not affected either, so I just never noticed it.
Yeah, it also affected a whole slew of third-party services, most notably Cloudflare.
Yeah, Cloudflare as well as VMware.
Yeah. So, and then of course Cloudflare affected many other services as well. The reason for that is one of their services, Key Value Store, is actually still behind or actually specifically Worker KV service, which is behind Cloudflare's Google's GCP blob storage. No, blob storage. Basically, their S3 alternative. And well, because of that, everything that is built on top of Workers KV crashed, which includes warp, access, gateway, images, stream, workers AI, turnstile, challenges, autorag, zaras, and parts of the dashboard.
So it didn't affect Cloudflare's DNS settings. So obviously you could still go to like our web service, but when you went to download our latest episode that was available at the time, it may or may not have worked depending on if it was cached into the Cloudflare CDN.
While they don't say here that R2 was affected, from what I heard, certain parts of R2 were affected, but that might be because it was fronted by something else, which is then mentioned here.
Yeah. Well, anyways, in total, this whole outage scenario was in a 2-hour block on a Friday, and it was roughly the mid-afternoon here for the United States. So, obviously, people noticed. And I did some due diligence digging, and I was seeing like social media things going like, is there like a massive cyber attack going on with Cloudflare or something like that? Because at this time, Google and Cloudflare didn't really announce what was going on, and then about an hour into it all, which is honestly pretty quick for like a public response. Google came out and said that this outage is our fault. But if you read the Google infrastructure blog, they figured it all out in 10 minutes. And
of course.
Within 2 minutes, they had the notification of it. Within 10 minutes, the root cause was identified, and then within 25 minutes, they started rolling out the fix. So realistically, it was fixed. It just took an hour before it got
propagated and you start bringing things up again and all that. Like, we should understand that getting something like this, which realistically crashes your infrastructure, bringing that infrastructure back up, especially when it's what is realistically probably million servers or close to million servers, takes a lot of time because you need to bring servers up, service by service, and even that one service needs to be brought up very slowly, because if it's not, you can get network congestion, which can cause other problems. And on top of that, even getting access to the service can be sometimes a problem, like what Cloudflare discovered, because one of their problems is that when they tried to see what was happening, they realized the dashboard wasn't working because it was using Cloudflare Access for login.
And
Cloudflare Access was down.
Yep, because it relies on
Which
Google
relies
Cloud.
on Workers KV, which was storing data in Google Cloud, so it didn't store on their own system. So even if their own systems went down, they would still, in theory, have Workers KV running. In theory. Problem was their third-party provider went down.
Yep. Which turned out to be Google.
Yeah. Which wasn't known up until now, actually.
Now, this raises a question, because, people are talking about this. Do we need... Is the internet, just like at this point, reaching an unsustainable path where we're putting too many buckets in one pocket here? No. I know that Google Cloud is not the only cloud provider. Like we could go off and list like at least 10 different companies that do a similar service, but Cloudflare does a lot of really, really critical stuff.
Yes, that's the only one that I would really call. But then again, like, the problem is that if you want to do something like Cloudflare does, you can only do it if you have a huge buy-in, so you need to be either a cloud provider or specifically do just that and know you're going to have millions or even billions of servers behind yourself, so you actually can buy yourself millions of servers all over the world.
One way or another, you want to have enough money to make yourself be a big enough deal that you're allowed to control like DNS servers.
Yes. Like remember things like this. If we decided to have DDoS protection that was our own build, we couldn't do it. Like, we would need
No.
literally every one of our listeners give us not $20, not $200, but $2,000 every month for us to even think about building a DDoS protection service.
Yeah, because realistically, what is DDoS protection? It's just more hardware, more servers, more stuff that can handle the
DDoS protection is literally a reverse proxy, a CDN that literally is so big it cannot fail. That's literally the point of it. So you can actually get all the load in the world and just go, okay, all these servers will take it and not even break a sweat. That's the point of DDoS protection. So you need thousands, tens of thousands, possibly millions of servers to really handle the kind of attacks they handle.
Yeah, which, honestly, you cannot self-host your way around
Yes.
around this kind of an issue. Lighted. As much of a fan as we are of self-hosting things, Bigpod, realistically, you're not self-hosting like a lot of these things. Like, you're probably not. Yes, you can self-host your own YouTube alternative,
Yes.
but it turns out that either nobody's going to use it, or you're going to have a massive hardware bill.
Yeah.
So,
Like, okay, so if we scale it down, we want to host our own CDN. So that's the point. Like, that's the catch. Like, behind the scenes, running a service, whether it be Castopod or a YouTube alternative or anything like that, is easy because service just fronts what is a CDN.
right?
But the reality is, hosting a CDN that is fast, reliable, and accessible everywhere equally fast, or at least nowhere slow, let's say that, would cost you thousands of dollars a day. Because remember, you don't just have like couple of kilobytes or a couple of megabytes, a couple of gigabytes of storage. You need terabytes of storage. Even if you just, let's say, Talkspace would have its own CDN, and okay, two of us would be behind it. Great. Now we need same storage in Europe, in America, in Asia, in Africa.
It's almost easier to just spin up a server here and then spin up a server in Europe, and then when you click the link, there's a load balancer that just sends you to the appropriate place.
That's literally what you're doing. That's
Yeah.
literally what you're doing. You're spinning up servers all over the world. Then you're using GeoIP to DNS point to the closest server, which is in reality a reverse proxy, which then goes and hits that. Because reality is, you're gonna need to have a single source of truth where service is and the data is, and they need to globally distribute this data anyway, because, well, otherwise you won't be able to access it. So
That's true.
CDN is an extremely complex thing, but in reality, if you're doing anything like even Castopod, like what we're doing, we need a CDN, and we're using a sort of CDN. We're using R2 object storage as our CDN.
It's worked.
While it's technically not globally distributed, it is in Cloudflare network. So as soon as more than one person accesses it, it's cached basically everywhere in Cloudflare network.
Even then, our average file size isn't even 30 megabytes. So
I believe average size for us of the part that we actually care about, so audio, is I believe 50.
Oh, okay, so it's a little bigger than I thought. Either way, it's a small it's a relatively small file that we're
let
serving.
me open the archive.
Yeah.
Where I have the so I'm gonna say the last episode we had the last two episodes, which are already edited, so last one was released yesterday actually, and the other one was also edited yesterday, 2 days ago. We had between on the low quality side 42 megabytes, and on the high quality side, so 320 kilobits per second bitrate, we had 110 megabytes. So about 50 to 60 megabytes size on average, I guess, which is actually really good. And now think about how much storage that is. Just for about, let's, even since we don't have all of them, let's say 63 times 60. What's that?
63 times 60. Well, let me bust out my handy calculator that I don't have installed on my computer.
3,600 plus 180. 3,780.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that's almost 4 gigabytes, which sounds small for 63 episodes. Now remember, the same thing, we have video. Now let's talk about video.
Yeah, video is where it starts to get a little expensive, because
our edit of the video is 11.6 gigabytes.
Yep.
And now multiply that by 63, so it should be about 700 gigabytes for 63 episodes.
So it just turns out that even though, like, I kind of joke about how I want to do it, I don't think I'm going to be spending money on a CDN soon. Decided, if it's going to be a CDN, it's going to be a very, very refined CDN of very few servers. So we probably won't have our own DDoS protection. But that's
now think about it this way. So we have 700, about 700 gigabytes currently used.
Yeah.
That is raw storage, which means double that for redundancy. Then multiply that by 3 or 6 if you want to just cover North America, Europe, and Asia, and we want to have high availability redundancy. So I mean 2 servers in every region. So that's 4.3, that's 4.1 terabytes, if I calculate correctly. No, I didn't. That's 4.2 terabytes of storage we need all together, and that's just for what we already have.
Yeah, so,
and remember, at that point, if we're gonna have something like a CDN, we're gonna have other customers.
Well, I hope we do.
So multiply that, because at that point we're gonna want to also set up other stuff, not just Castopod, for customers. We're gonna have a huge amount of data and huge amount of data to serve, and that's just storage. Don't forget bandwidth. Don't forget things like compute costs. It's expensive. Now, at this point, I don't know where we were before we went on this tangent. So, Josh, you might remember.
Well, I mean, we were talking about what it would look like if we were to like consider like moving off of like these cloud services, which at some point we might be able to get away with it, but I don't think right now we're going to be doing that because
I don't think we will ever be moving off of them fully.
It's still going to be there somewhere, like at some point. Like, obviously, if you go to Tuxbase.com, that's a single server. Like it off That's a single server right now. The only
Somebody in cloud.
yeah, the only like actual like cloud thing that you would run into that we don't necessarily have like some amount of control over is like the R2 service, which that's where you get the episode download from. Which in that case, then you have the YouTube backup, or you can just wait for it to get fixed. Because heaven forbid, you're probably not going to like our Castpod instance directly anyway, outside of like maybe one time ever just to subscribe to the feed, which hopefully you do. But and then at that point, you're just waiting on your podcast application to just download it.
Yeah.
Now, let's move on to the next topic here because Bigpod, we're a tech podcast. We got to talk about AI, right?
Well, before we do that, what do you think are we too, as generally internet, are we too reliant on these cloud services?
I have a bit of a mixed opinion on it because I do think that it depends mostly on like use case. Like heaven forbid, why does a blog need to be running on like this massive platform that includes like all of this wonderful stuff that is not necessary for the blog itself, or like this news website?
Well, it doesn't. You could run it off of Cloudflare static pages, essentially R2.
Yeah, you could. But if you go to like WordPress.com and you ask WordPress to host your blog for you, you're paying them like $20 to $30 per month, depending on what plan you subscribe to.
Remember, WordPress is from the time when static stuff wasn't not popular, but wasn't really realistic usage. Because guess what?
That is true because
everything had to be PHP.
Yeah, because we didn't really have static site generators yet. Not to the programs that we have today, at least. I know that yes, they did exist back then, but they weren't as common.
And everything had to be PHP because you wanted some level of interactivity. The level of interactivity now you get through things like JavaScript, which at the time, while you could get, nobody really wrote stuff for that. So it was really hard to get that kind of level of interactivity through JavaScript that you could get through PHP.
But yeah, but even then, it's just like a lot of those blog platforms, the traffic is so minimal because you're just transferring text and maybe some images.
Yeah.
That you don't necessarily have to rely on like these massive cloud services to be able to host something like that. In fact, I think WordPress.com doesn't actually use like a cloud service. I literally think that they just have their own stuff.
Yeah.
But like the alternatives like the Wix and those other blog websites, some of them might actually use the cloud services. Or, like your company website that you would have for like your small company probably doesn't need to be on like the massive cloud service, even though it's probably more affordable to do so because the big thing that the cloud services have is like those free plans are amazing.
Yes.
Like
and that's the thing I was talking about, the scale of the things. So how scale can affect pricing. Like I forget the term. The economy of scale. That's what I was thinking. Basically, that's the point. Economy of scale. Like they can afford to give you, I don't know, 10 gigabytes of free storage because like that's nothing for them, because that's literally what they got for free when they bought, I don't know, 100,000 SSDs.
Yeah, which I think that's convenient. Now, obviously, something like YouTube, first of all, there's a reason why there's no real competition for YouTube. I'm sorry, Odyssey users. I'm sorry, PeerTube users. You're not really a viable alternative at all. Because you just can't operate on the same scale as YouTube.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily talking about from like video streaming service. I'm talking about from like the video social media style service that YouTube,
the video distribution,
more or less,
is a distribution perspective.
Yeah.
User distribution perspective, you cannot. There is no chance you're gonna have a viable alternative because of how massive YouTube has to be. There is like, I believe it's like hundreds of terabytes of new videos per day.
Hundreds of gigs per second that's being added to that
Yeah.
platform. It's
Yeah.
insane. So that's obviously why when you see like these YouTubers go and spin off like their own video streaming services, they're often subscription only services. You know, like
Yeah.
the float planes and the what's the other ones, like
Nebula. Yeah.
I think there was another one that I think is shutting down or something like that. But either way, they start up, they try to be free. Turns out that they can't be free, so they put in the
Like-
subscription only. And then sometimes they just never really get enough traffic to just justify keep operating, so then they shut down.
I'm gonna be honest. LTT did a good thing by how they positioned Floatplane from the start. They from the
Right?
start talked about not being a YouTube competitor.
Right? That
Yeah.
said, of those services, I think Floatplane is actually one of the better options.
Yeah.
That said, there is something to say about like the work of quality that the YouTube video player has these days, because you got to remember YouTube's job is to serve content, and they do that really well. Like
Yeah.
you can watch YouTube on a dial-up connection,
Yeah.
like actually.
Like, I'm gonna tell you a bit of an anecdote. So, I like streaming. You know, you're thinking, okay, Twitch gonna be gold standard for quality, right? No.
No, not
Sorry.
really. Sorry.
I don't watch Twitch for a single reason. Because when I'm gonna watch something long form like a stream, that isn't like, because I don't watch gaming streams. If I watch streams, I watch something like conferences or some programmer talking, or maybe if I do watch, I watch a friend. I'm very likely gonna watch while I'm outside, possibly mowing lawn, because I have to do that and I have to listen to something, and listening to music all the time kind of gets boring.
Yep.
If you're not streaming on YouTube, I ain't listening to you, because I'm not gonna wait three words pause, 3 words pause, 3 words pause, because that's what Twitch website and app do for me, because there's just not good distribution. Sorry. YouTube works all the time
Yeah.
at
And
quality. We're not talking like 360p. At quality. Like, I have it. I rarely see anything below 1080p on my phone.
yeah, that said, you might get 1080p with a lower bitrate, but you're still getting 1080p, which just speaks for itself. Because you can have 1080p at 1000 bitrate,
Yeah.
and it still looks better than 720p at like 8000 bitrate. So, sorry, there's just sometimes bigger is better in terms of resolution.
Yeah.
So, let's hop off this topic here, Bigpod, because you know we could go
Yeah.
about this for a while.
Yeah.
But let's talk about AI here, because it turns out that this is not the first article that I've seen about this, but we're probably going to start seeing more news articles about this. So I want to get this out of the way already, because heaven forbid, ChatGPT has gotten so popular, it's already affecting AI training development.
Yep.
And
So
yeah.
So basically, I'm gonna talk about, before we go into the article, I'm gonna talk about from my point of view. So basically, as a developer, I already saw the like writing on the wall. If you're gonna take data from online and learn from it to create your large language model, which includes no thinking really outside of reasoning models, you're gonna have right now a huge amount of data. But remember, because there are things like Stack Overflow, which yes, you need to clean up, but it's not that bad because it's all human generated content and it's all relatively correct. Now, for let's say React, you had a lot of content. So JavaScript, React, you had a lot of content, whether it be blog posts, whether it be Stack Overflow, this, that, all the things. Now take, for example, let's say I create the tags-based JavaScript framework, and people want to use it. Outside of maybe shitty documentation, there is absolutely no other information for AIs to learn off of, which means there is no information for you to then ask it questions and get anywhere close to good answers. And this doesn't even include blog posts and news articles written by AI. So Josh, take it away with what the article actually talks about.
All right, so the article is basically talking about like what the title is. And it's comparing like what the effect that AI is having on the internet with like U.S. nuclear testing back in 1945 and how it's affected like the steel industry. Because it turns out that when you're dealing with very precise scientific data, you can't use any steel that was produced anywhere in the world post 1945.
Interesting.
You just can't, because the radioactive and particles and particulates had just ruined them for certain measurements. So that leads to some issues of where it turns out that there's value found in like old shipwrecks. Okay, but that's what they're comparing this to. So ideally, when you're looking for data for AI, you want to try to find data that was produced before 2023. You're looking for that 2022 cutoff date on like your file history. That's where you kind of want to stop, because that's basically like the gold standard from pre-generative AI contamination. And they're saying that like these AI tags that you see, like when you go to post on Facebook, there's a little button there that you have to tick for like, was this generated by AI or not, or like even YouTube has like a check for it nowadays.
Yeah.
So you're starting to see that they're saying that if people actually make use of that tag, which there are AI models that don't, that could help. But ultimately, to be able to make sure that the data is actually good for like these future AI models, it's going to be very expensive and probably involve a lot of human labor, because heaven forbid,
yeah.
I don't know if we can trust AI to remove AI.
Yeah. So basically what you're trying to prevent is garbage in, garbage out. But in this case, AI garbage in, so you don't get even bigger AI garbage out.
Yep. That said, they have the solution for like the AI labeling thing is mostly like being spawned by governments, which these AI companies have lobbied very heavily against like any regulation whatsoever, at least here in the United States.
Yeah,
probably to some extent in Europe as well. I would assume, but it's probably much more difficult in Europe than it is here in the U.S.
Because if Europe decides something will happen in the regards of regulation, it's gonna happen whether you like it or not.
Yeah, so it's going to be a problem, and honestly, as much as I like bouncing like campaign story ideas off of AIs, that's really about what I use them for. It sure would be nice that if I ever come around to like asking AI a serious question, like say like configuring like an Nginx configuration, that using something that I haven't done before, because heaven forbid, that's easier than reading the documentation and figuring it out by myself most of the time.
Yeah.
these AI tools might be trained on so much garbage that they might not know that there's an Nginx Community Edition and an Nginx Professional Edition, which have two very different documentation pages because they use two very different APIs.
Yeah. Remember Google, one of the old versions of Google AI, which threw out such garbage is actually dangerous. And the reason for that is because they were using bad data.
Yep.
You have to have clean data, correct data. Otherwise, you're gonna have problems. If AI put out garbage the first time and then learns from that garbage, next time it's gonna have just bigger garbage. It's the telephone game, literally. It's literally a definition of the telephone game. Do you know the telephone game?
I do know a telephone game. That's basically where you line up a bunch of people, tell one person on one end of the line to say a phrase and pass it on, and see what comes out at the other end of the line.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I think that we're going to see like a decline in like the quality of things that we see on the internet because heaven forbid if Facebook has anything to say.
We already seen it.
Yeah, I've already seen it on Facebook because heaven forbid I logged into Facebook for the first time in forever because I don't really use a Facebook webpage. I mostly just use Messenger these days, but I logged into the Facebook webpage, and when I wasn't looking at an ad, I was looking at something generated by AI.
Yeah.
Like I saw like no content that I could reliably say was created by a human until I hit the page down button 4 times on my keyboard because heaven forbid the scroll wheel on my mouse quit working. So I think that we're going to deal with more of what has been knowingly referred to as enshittification. We're going to be dealing with that a bit more, at least in the near future. But of course, we're going to see these social media services probably package up like old data and sell it at a premium to like these AI companies, and just angle go there. We scrubbed all this data of the AI for you. This costs like extra monies. You can totally have this. I look forward to see Reddit attempt to do that. Well, anyways, Bigpod, I see the 56-minute marker on my OBS recording, which means that we should probably look towards wrapping up the show. But first of all, if you would like to give us some feedback, maybe you're an AI developer and you want to talk to us because heaven forbid we said something wrong about AI, or you're a Google engineer, we'd love to talk to you. Send us an email. Go to contact@tuxbase.com. Send us an email. The SMTP protocol has been in existence for many, many years at this point. So it is a well-refined protocol, and it just plain works because it doesn't rely on Google. So you could send us an email, talk to us about that, or you can talk to us about any other topics. Like why does Josh keep switching distros constantly? Because heaven forbid, it turns out that all distros suck in some way or another. Even though distro doesn't matter until it does. But or maybe you just want to shout at Bigpod because heaven forbid he said something wrong. Because Bigpod has been known to do that. Just leaving that there, just dangling. Or maybe if you want to talk to each other, we do have a community Discord available. The link is in the description because we're too lazy to set up our own link. Either too lazy or too cheap. It's one of the two. Or if you would like to support the show because maybe you do want to see us attempt to make our own CDN, go to patreon.com/notuxallowed. You give us a monthly subscription there, of which then we will give you a higher quality audio feed that may or may not include bonus content in the future sometime when we get around to it. Or maybe when I remember to hit the recording button as I listen to like this guy rant about Ex Libre and how it's going to save the world from Red Hat. Because heaven forbid, Red Hat's an evil company. But anyways, I think that's going to be it for the show. Bigpod, I'll see you later.
Goodbye.